Welcome to our module on mechanical weed management.
This module was authored by Christine Moncada, Carmen Fernholz, Jeff Gonsolas, Constance Carlson, and Craig Schaefer from the University of Minnesota in 2017 and updated in 2026. Narrated by Constance Carlson, with additional narration generated using the AI voice of Hannah from ElevenLabs.
This module focuses on mechanical weed management, one of the two primary ways organic farmers manage weeds on their land. For information on the other primary method, please watch our previous module on cultural weed management. Mechanical weed control is the use of equipment to destroy weeds by burying, uprooting, breaking apart, or drying weeds out. Mechanical weed control can be classified by when it is performed. Primary tillage and seed bed preparation are before the crop is planted, and cultivation is after the crop is planted. There are many types of equipment for each category. One experienced organic farmer says that you will need to have options for equipment to use, and some years you may not need every equipment type. Now we will discuss these different categories of mechanical weed control in more detail. For most organic farmers, and likely for you as a transitioning organic farmer, tillage is an important aspect in weed control. Tillage generally consists of two steps: primary tillage followed by secondary tillage. Each of these steps can kill weeds in addition to preparing the soil for the next crop. Primary tillage is the use of plows to turn over the soil and incorporate crop residue. Generally, soil conditions will dictate whether primary tillage is performed in the fall or spring. Primary tillage can destroy existing weeds, but it also can bring previously deeply buried weed seeds to the soil surface, where they are able to germinate. Equipment used for primary tillage is the moldboard plow, the chisel plow, and the disc plow. Moldboard plows turn over the soil completely and incorporate residue. This plow can bury weeds and even kill perennial weeds. It is used less often today because of its negative effects on soil structure. For example, moldboard tillage in the fall removes the protective layer of crop residue from the soil before winter, while in the spring it can cause the soil to lose moisture. Discs are used especially after low residue crops such as soybean and small grains. They can also be used in secondary tillage. We will discuss secondary tillage in the next section. Chisel plows are commonly used in the upper Midwest. Chisel plows disturb the soil much less than moldboard plows. Depending on the type of chisel tools and shanks used, there will be variable degrees of disturbance. This plow can set back perennial weeds and can destroy early emerging immature weeds. Conservation tillage is defined as tillage that leaves 30% of residue remaining on the top of the soil. This protects the soil from water and wind erosion. Chisel plow and discs are commonly used for conservation tillage. Tillage practices favor some weed species over others. For example, often as primary tillage decreases, you will see an increase in perennial weed species and annual grasses. Some large seeded broadleaf weeds, such as cocklebur, often decline in prominence. Seed bed preparation occurs after primary tillage. Seed bed preparation, also called secondary tillage, evens out the soil so that planting can be performed more effectively. It also can function to work in amendments as well as control weeds that appear before planting. The equipment used to perform secondary tillage is field cultivators, discs, and harrows. Secondary tillage can have a significant influence on controlling weeds. The goal is to give the crop an even start against weeds, rather than playing a game of catch-up. There are two different strategies relating to secondary tillage: stale seedbed and false seedbed. We will discuss false seedbed as it is the more commonly used method. We will not cover stale seedbed, which is a technique where the soil is disturbed as little as possible to limit weed flushes. Tillage encourages weed seeds in the soil to germinate. The false seedbed technique is called false because the farmers are fooling the weeds into germinating with the purpose of killing them later. Secondary tillage used in this situation occurs a few weeks prior to crop planting. The first operation results in a flush of weeds. Then a week or more later, these weeds are killed by a second operation. The crop must be planted immediately after the last round of weeds is killed so that I can get a head start over the next flush of weeds. The false seedbed technique can be used in row crops or any other new seeding. The first step is tillage at a depth of 3 to 4 inches. This would be considered secondary tillage if you remember the terms we discussed earlier. It is helpful if the soil is warm, around 60 to 65 degrees. Otherwise, the weed flush may not occur. Late afternoon is often when soil is warmest. Having the soil as warm and dry as possible will minimize soil compaction. This first step would generally occur in late April in Minnesota. Step 2 is waiting for the weed flush. This can take about 3 weeks' time, which would be around early to mid-May in Minnesota. Now that the weed seedlings have grown, the next step is a second round of tillage. This tillage should be 2 to 3 inches deep. The newly emerged weeds should be at an ideal stage to be killed. The last step is to plant the crop as soon as possible. Try to make sure that you can perform step 3 and step 4 in quick succession by taking weather into consideration. If all has gone as planned, the crop emerges and there is reduced weed competition. As a review, here are 3 important tips for success when implementing the false seedbed technique. First, it is best to start when the soil is warm so that weeds have a chance to germinate. Next, shallow tillage operations are more effective because deep tillage will bring more of the seeds from the weed seedbed to the surface. And finally, it is very important to plant the crop immediately after the last tillage operation, or else many of the benefits of the technique will be lost. And here are a few warnings. The false seedbed technique can be performed more than once in a season, but it can become detrimental to crop yields if planting is delayed too long. It is of little use for early planted cool season crops. False seedbed is not recommended under drought conditions because the extra tillage operations may make the soil too dry and prevent good seed-to-soil contact for the crop. Here is an example of what the soil looks like after implementing the false seedbed technique. In this field, we see no weeds because they were controlled prior to the corn that was just planted. Now we will discuss different types of cultivation, which occurs after the crop has been planted. We will discuss cultivation in relation to row crops like corn and soybean. Generally, small grains and forages have much less or even no cultivation after planting. Cultivation can be categorized by timing, either pre-emergence or post-emergence. Once the crop has grown a little, cultivation can also be categorized by type, either between rows or within rows. The weeds that emerge before or with the crop are the most critical to control. And they are the most important to control because these weeds will be the most competitive with the crop. Cultivation before the crop emerges is called blind cultivation because it is performed over the whole field without regard for crop rows. 3 to 5 days after the crop is planted is the best time for blind cultivation. The goal is to cultivate only the top 1 inch of soil because any deeper will affect the crop. Weather will also be a factor in effectiveness. Warm, dry, windy days will help kill weeds better. Farmers get the best weed control from tillage when the weeds are very small, as is shown here. This is called the white thread stage because of the way the roots of the weeds appear. Equipment used for cultivation before a crop emerges includes chain harrows, flex-tine harrows, spring-tooth harrows, spike-tooth harrows, and rotary hoes. The spring-tooth and spike-tooth harrows are the most aggressive of these options. Soil type is a factor in selecting equipment. Lighter soils may not be amenable to aggressive operations. One longtime organic farmer recommends tine weeding 3 days after planting to get weeds at the white thread stage. Because the crop hasn't emerged, you can go right on top of the row. Weeds that emerge with the crop also need to be controlled, so blind cultivation after the crop emerges is performed. Because the crop seedlings can be damaged after they have emerged, more care needs to be taken in this type of blind cultivation. When performing, you may need to increase your planting rate to compensate for crop losses. Equipment commonly used after the crop emerges include flex-tine harrows, rotary hoes, or cultivators. Keep in mind that rotary hoeing will not be particularly effective if weeds are more mature and beyond the white thread stage. You'll know they are beyond the white thread stage when you see a first leaf emerging on the weeds. Because the rotary hoe and harrow are blind cultivation operations, the crop stage at which to conduct the operation is critical to prevent crop damage. This table from North Dakota State University Extension is a good guide to know when these operations can be performed, both before and after each crop has emerged from the soil. This image illustrates lack of effective weed control in corn at the early crop growth stages. Inter-row cultivation, which we will cover next, has removed weeds from between the rows, but weeds within the crop row remain. Yields were not good in this field. As the name suggests, inter-row cultivation occurs between the rows in row crops. It is performed up to 3 to 5 weeks after planting, basically until the equipment no longer clears the crop. Timing is less critical as far as the crop stage is concerned, but the younger the weeds, the better. This cultivation is more aggressive than post-emergence broadcast operations, so it can kill weeds that are more mature. Use inter-row cultivation only when necessary, as cultivation can dry out the soil. There are a wide variety of inter-row cultivation tools. Cultivators are most commonly used, but there are many other choices that may be suitable depending on your conditions. The Lilliston rolling cultivator is an example of equipment used between rows. The attachments can be angled to push soil toward or away from the crop depending on which gives more advantage to the crop. One experienced organic farmer keeps 2 of these cultivators, each one kept permanently at the toward and away orientations. This saves time of constantly adjusting back and forth. Here are some basic guidelines for mechanical weed control. Do the operations as infrequently as possible to protect the soil and avoid unnecessary expenditures. Get weeds when they're tiny, as close after germination as possible. Use the right equipment for the current problem. Some equipment is more aggressive, for example, and may be more effective on high populations of weeds. Ideally, it is best to conduct mechanical weed control operations when they are most effective in killing weeds. but you must take advantage of favorable weather when it occurs. Some weed control options will inevitably take out a few of your crop seedlings. In fact, some organic farmers say that the operation is not effective against weeds unless there are at least some crop seedlings lost. A good rule of thumb is to not exceed 5% crop loss with each weed control operation. Make sure that your planting rate compensates for any anticipated crop losses. Thank you for watching our module.
This project is supported by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, Organic Transitions Program under Award Number 2013-5, 1106-2-1005. This project is supported by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Agricultural Marketing Service, National Organic Program under the Transition to Organic Partnership Program, TOPP, in the Midwest region. Any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this publication are those of the authors and should not be construed to represent any official USDA or U.S. government determination or policy. The University of Minnesota shall provide equal access to and opportunity in its programs, facilities, and employment without regard to race, color, creed, religion, national origin, gender, age, marital status, familial status, disability, public assistance status, membership or activity in a local commission created for the purpose of dealing with discrimination, veteran status, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. For more information about this project, please see organicag.umn.edu, copyright 2026, Regents of the University of Minnesota. All rights reserved.